I know it sounds crazy, but honestly, you would have done the same thing. My mom has worked in an office her whole life. These histories are close to my heart. The story isn't just for views, it's a real experience wrapped up in a fictional form. I want people to recognize themselves in it and not repeat other people's mistakes. All names, companies, addresses, and events are fictional, change confidentiality. Listen carefully, this isn't about money, it's about respect.
He didn't even look me in the eye when he dropped the envelope, just tossed it on my desk like a takeout receipt. I was finalizing the Q4 compliance logs, double-checking timestamps for Audit Sync. And here he comes, Miles Donovan, with all the self-awareness of a sledgehammer in a china shop. "Thought you deserved something," he said, smirking like a man who thinks gifting a candle fixes a gas leak. I opened it. $60 in cash, 3 crisp 20s, and a card that read, "Appreciate your grind," not "thank you," not "great work on the vendor escrow reversals," which, by the way, saved us from a 300K exposure last quarter. Just grind, like I was some coffee bean he'd just run through his machine. I stared at it for a second longer than I should have, then slid the money back into the envelope and tucked it into my drawer like a piece of trash you don't throw away yet because you're still deciding how petty you're going to get. Before we go any further, if you've ever been handed pocket change for work that held a whole department together, hit that like button. And please subscribe. 97% of people don't, and it really does help the team keep telling stories like this one. Next morning, he strutted past my desk, paused, and with that frat boy chuckle said, "So, feeling better now?" As if I'd spent the night weeping into my throw pillows and was now healed by the gospel of 3 Jacksons. I looked at him and gave a little nod. Didn't say a word. Let him think I was that easy to buy. What he didn't know, and what he'd never even think to imagine, was that I'd already scanned the envelope, uploaded the metadata to our internal risk log, and filed a secure message to the CEO's office. Not because I wanted to see him fired, not yet anyway, but because I needed to log the signal. You see, Miles didn't understand the systems beneath the systems, the kind you don't find in org charts or SOPs, the kind that live in people like me, people who quietly hold the entire machine together without ever asking for credit. I'd been at Wexley Digital for 6 years, 6 annual audits passed with 0 flags. I built the partner reconciliation flow from scratch after our Hong Kong vendor almost triggered a lawsuit in 2019. I implemented the alerting logic that caught 2 internal fraud attempts before finance even saw them. I didn't have a fancy title. Just Senior Ops Analyst. No one claps when you do the unglamorous back-end work right. But mess it up once? You're headline news. Miles had no idea who I really was. He thought I was a middle manager with a nice desktop cactus and a flexible moral compass. He didn't see the database permissions I still held, the fallback control scripts I'd coded after our merger with Syndrel Tech, the quietly renewed private key licenses that protected half our infrastructure. Hell, he didn't even notice that I'd routed all system notifications through a shadow node to catch edits like the ones he was starting to make without approval. Because that's the thing about performative leadership. It's loud, fast, and blind to nuance. And Miles, bless his bootstrapped little soul, was loudest of them all. He came in quoting startup books and cutting redundancy without understanding what redundancy even meant in ops architecture. Every change he made triggered downstream chaos someone else had to clean up, usually me. But I didn't push back, not directly. I documented, I time-stamped. I let the paper trail speak louder than my voice ever could. That envelope wasn't just tone-deaf, it was reckless. Discretionary cash with no logging, no tax alignment, no protocol. It was a violation of our own comp policies, and technically a liability if he handed it out to the wrong employee. But more than that, it was insulting. A gesture that screamed, "I don't actually know what you do, but I need to look like I care." So I escalated. Quietly. Formally. Logged it in our incentive reporting module as an unstructured payment artifact. Attached supporting documentation. Labeled it under cultural risk, incentive misalignment. That's the kind of language our CEO understands. Because cultural rot starts small, usually with someone trying to buy dignity on a discount. By Monday morning, my inbox dinged. It was from the CEO's assistant. "Would you be available for a confidential 15-minute chat tomorrow? Mr. Caro has some questions about operations dynamics." I smiled. Not because it was happening, but because it was only just beginning. I didn't flinch when he said it, just kept typing like the comment barely grazed my bandwidth. But inside? Oh, I logged that smug chuckle like a bug in the system. So, feeling better now? It echoed in my head all day, like he thought this was a sitcom and I was the underdog who just needed a pat on the head and a $20 morale boost. He didn't get it. He thought I wanted recognition. What I've always wanted was accountability, and he just handed me the receipt. By that point, the envelope had already been scanned, logged, and documented with exact GPS coordinates from our building's internal Wi-Fi logs. I'd tagged it in the Incentive Irregularity Register. Yes, that's a real thing. And nested it under Non-Structured Staff Comp, Q4 Holiday Discretion. The folder also included a screenshot of our internal expense policy, where it clearly stated all staff compensation, monetary or material, must be cleared through HR or finance. It also stated any bonus, incentive, or gift must be equal and auditable, which made the $60 a violation on 3 fronts. 4 if you count ego. See, Miles was playing corporate poker with a deck full of glossy buzzwords. But I knew every clause, every trap, and every audit hook that lived quietly in our operations framework. I wrote half of them. I'd spent years at Wexley designing systems that caught these kinds of lapses before they became culture-wide cancers. He walked in, assuming no one was watching. No one was tracking. He assumed I was just another back-office drone who didn't know the difference between a policy and a protocol. Rookie mistake. I didn't bring it up in meetings. Didn't tattle to HR or forward it around to stir the pot. Because if you want to make a message stick, you don't shout it. You let it arrive in a manila envelope with your CEO's initials in the corner and one of my flagged reports inside. And that envelope was already en route. The thing is, the money itself didn't matter. What mattered was what it revealed. That he saw leadership as theater and people as props. That he thought influence meant throwing petty scraps while gutting structural support. That he didn't understand the difference between performance and permanence. Real leadership isn't handing someone $60 and calling it appreciation. It's knowing who's been holding the system together so long your revenue pipeline doesn't leak data or lawsuits. And while Miles was busy rearranging our workflows like a bored toddler with building blocks, I was busy tuning the silent sensors in our compliance grid. You know what happens when you make unauthorized alterations to vendor logic pathways without triggering a 2-key override? The system flags it, automatically, and sends it to the audit queue, but only if the override fails. And guess who still held the second key? Me. So when he started optimizing our ops layers, removing redundant validations, deactivating sign-off fields, simplifying contract renewal timers, he had no idea those changes didn't actually go through. I'd built shadow locks into critical pathways that prevented cascading failure. He was basically drawing on the whiteboard with a dry pen. That's the difference. He saw procedures as obstacles. I saw them as the only reason we still had a functioning business model after our last investor round. I don't make noise. I don't campaign. I don't send long Slack rants or CC the world on my concerns. I write. I log. I escalate quietly, only when I'm sure the ground beneath someone is already crumbling, and all I need to do is lift the rug and let them trip. That envelope he dropped on my desk, it wasn't a thank you. It was a timestamp. A live marker of the moment someone forgot that operations isn't just logistics, it's leverage, and the message was already moving upstream. The message went out at 8:12 a.m. sharp. Nothing dramatic, just a clean, secure upload to the CEO's direct intake system, one I'd quietly helped design 2 years ago when we transitioned to zero trust architecture. Miles didn't know it existed. Most people didn't. It was for sensitive internal signals, our polite way of saying, flag leadership without lighting the office on fire. Subject line, Wexley Ops, cultural risk signal. Body, concise, 4 bullet points. Unauthorized staff incentive issued in cash. No disclosure to HR, finance, or direct supervisor. I had no supervisor on record, just him. Inconsistent treatment across team. I confirmed no one else received anything. Risk of perceived bias, non-compliance, and morale distortion. Attached were 3 PDFs. 1. A scanned copy of the envelope, time-stamped with the security badge logs from his office. 2. A screenshot of our own policy doc, highlighted sections, clauses, relevant signatures. And 3. A spreadsheet showing our team's performance metrics since Miles took over. Quiet attrition, missed syncs, escalation delays, everything wrapped in surgical neutrality. No commentary, no emotion, no passive-aggressive tone, just data. Systems speak louder than outrage. I knew what this was. Not a smoking gun, not some corporate takedown fantasy. This was a drip. And in ops, a drip is all it takes to start a flood, if the pressure behind the system is high enough. And right now, Wexley's pressure was rising. Partner dissatisfaction, missed SLAs. 2 senior engineers had already left quietly. HR hadn't figured out why. I had. They were tired of being invisible until things broke. Tired of leaders who didn't know what we actually did but still thought we should smile harder, sync more, complain less. Miles hadn't been around long enough to see what happened to the last guy who streamlined ops. Let's just say his new job involves fewer systems and more sandwiches. I don't gloat about that either, but I'd been the one who quietly handed Risk the logs that started that off-boarding inquiry, and now here we were again. After sending the report, I minimized the window, took a breath, and returned to my morning sync prep like nothing happened. No change in tone, no comment in the team chat, because once you've played long enough in operations, you understand that real moves aren't made in meetings. They're made in metadata, in silent flags, in how the system is architected to catch imbalance, even when no one is watching. That morning, Miles pinged our group chat about new productivity benchmarks. I smiled. Of course he was doubling down. He probably thought his little holiday gift softened the blow. The man was still playing checkers on a circuit board, but that's fine. He'd keep moving his pieces, and the board would log every move. I didn't expect the CEO to reply. That wasn't the point. The point was activating a system that watched the watchers. That held leadership to the same accountability we demanded from vendors and analysts and interns and part-time remote QA testers logging in from Bulgaria at 3 a.m. A good system doesn't scream when it detects risk. It just records it, cross-references it, flags it, then it waits. So did I. The invite landed in my inbox at 10:07 a.m. Calendar block. No subject line fluff. Just 15-min sync, CEO, OPS context. It was from Ali, his exec assistant. She was polite, surgically efficient, and never scheduled anything that didn't matter. When Ali sent you something, you cleared your calendar and showed up prepared. No panic. I ran a quick mental sweep of my intake notes, synced my ops context with our internal performance markers, and flagged 3 key metrics he'd likely care about: throughput lag since reorg, audit exception drift, and partner satisfaction trend lines. The video call opened precisely on time. No small talk. "Thanks for joining," he said, folding his hands. "I'd like to get a better sense of the dynamics on your floor. Culture, structure, gaps, whatever's relevant." I nodded once, kept it simple. "No names," I began, "but there's a visible shift. What used to be a process-oriented culture has become performance theater heavy. Metrics are being gamified. Short-term wins, long-term blind spots. We're seeing more downstream escalations, fewer shared definitions of success." He raised an eyebrow. "Examples?" Vendor renewals delayed because intake reviews were skipped to save time. QA feedback ignored if it doesn't hit the dashboard before noon, and frontline staff don't speak up because they're watching others disappear. There was a pause. Not defensive, thoughtful, like someone mentally lining up puzzle pieces that had been scattered across meetings, dashboards, and late-night investor calls. I leaned in, just a bit. For context, my formal title is Senior Operations Analyst, but I also maintain embedded compliance hooks in our process automation. I manage the triggers tied to partner audit windows and integrity flags in workflow overrides. His eyes shifted for the first time, not wide, but sharper, focused. "You built those?" "I did," I said. "Under our prior compliance directive. They're what kept our SLA risk under 0.7% last year, and they're still live. Most aren't documented outside my scope." Silence. Then a small nod. "You've never brought that forward." "Wasn't needed," I replied. Until now. Another beat of quiet. This time, it wasn't just processing, it was recalibration. I appreciate the clarity, he said finally, and the precision. All I've ever wanted is for the systems to function like they should. Transparent, accountable, scalable. What's breaking isn't the tech, it's the trust. He didn't push for more. He didn't need to. He'd heard enough. We closed the call in under 12 minutes. No promise of follow-up. No signals dropped. But I knew I'd landed something. Not because of what I said, but because of what I didn't have to say. I never once used Miles's name. Didn't have to. When a system is out of balance, the source reveals itself in the patterns. And if you've built those patterns yourself, you know exactly where to look. All I'd done was illuminate the design. He was smart enough to follow the wiring. After I logged off, I opened a new browser tab and reviewed the permissions matrix. Miles still had elevated access in 3 modules he never should have touched. That was next. Not because I was angry, because I was done pretending his damage was reversible. This wasn't a grudge, it was risk management. And someone had finally noticed. I pulled up our internal control framework like I'd done 100 times before. But this time, I wasn't just tightening bolts. I was laying groundwork. The kind of groundwork that doesn't look like much until you're neck deep in audit prep and someone at legal squints at a dashboard and says, "Wait, what's this?" I navigated to the discretionary transactions module, selected unstructured staff interaction, and entered the metadata from Miles's little holiday gift. Date, Friday. Method, cash. Amount, $60. Delivering party, mid-level operations leadership. Recipient, omitted, per discretionary protocol logging standards. That omission wasn't a mistake. It ensured the system wouldn't auto-close the entry. It would hover in a limbo state until human review. That's what I wanted. Not a flag. A soft pulse. Next, I tagged it non-structured remuneration and placed a compliance sensitivity note. Lacks HR and finance vetting. Potential comp equity inconsistency across org. That phrasing? It's a loaded grenade for auditors. You don't need to yell when you've built the language that screams for you. All you have to do is place it quietly on the shelf where you know they'll be forced to look later. The system did the rest. I designed it that way. 3 minutes later, a soft alert registered under our audit prep sweep queue. It wouldn't trigger an emergency. It wouldn't send a flare to the CFO. It would just live there, waiting for the quarterly pre-audit risk roundup. And when that meeting rolled around, someone in legal or ops governance would click through, glance at the flagged terms, and think, why the hell was someone handing out undocumented cash bonuses? By the time they asked, the breadcrumb trail would already be waiting, not just the scanned envelope, but the policies, the procedural inconsistencies, the lack of parity across the team. If someone else got nothing, and I could prove they hadn't, that was a fairness issue. If finance wasn't informed, that was a compliance issue. And if no logging existed outside of mine, well, that was a transparency issue. 3 strikes, no need for emotional testimony, because that's how these things are built. Not with fire, with receipts. I didn't announce any of this, didn't forward the update to HR or ping my manager. I don't have a manager, not really. Miles was technically my skip. And in ops, we don't beg for clarity. We engineer it, quietly, repeatedly, until the architecture outlives the ego. This was never about vengeance. It was about structure. Structure that protects integrity, even when leadership forgets what that word means. Structure that makes the right thing, the easy thing, and the wrong thing a documented anomaly. I updated the risk review tracker next, added a new line under interpersonal integrity risks. Didn't name him. Didn't need to. The system links were traceable, and the metadata unmistakable. One click from audit would lead them to the full context, and the CEO's assistant already had it saved. This wasn't just about an envelope anymore. It was about signals, patterns, gaps forming in a floor that used to be steel-plated and watertight, and I had no intention of letting a man who thought grind was a compliment turn my floor into a sinkhole. So I saved my update, logged the event, and then I sat back. Not satisfied. Just sure. The email came in late Wednesday. Subject line, compliance flow delay escalating. It was from a senior operations lead at Norcrest Partners, one of our longest-standing vendor firms. Calm, but not casual. When external partners start using words like escalating, it's rarely a glitch, it's a signal. I read it twice, then pulled the logs. Norcrest was supposed to receive an automated reconciliation trigger the previous Friday. The system hadn't failed. The delivery had simply shifted, not delayed, not broken, just routed through a different node, one that skipped the usual compliance checksum handshake I'd hard-coded into our core logic 3 years ago, which meant someone had tampered with the rules engine. I ran a trace on the edit path. The override originated from Miles's admin panel. 2 lines of automation logic altered. The names of the variables had changed, slightly. Check compliance trigger was now quick compliance check. Aesthetic differences, syntactic rewording. He thought he was cleaning up language, maybe even speeding things up. I could almost hear the internal monologue. Streamline, simplify, modernize. But his edit never actually deployed, because I'd built integrity locks into every core compliance trigger. Silent trip wires that required a secondary key, mine. Without it, all changes to core routing logic reverted back within 60 seconds. Cosmetic tweaks would save, sure. Look pretty, even pass a basic test run. But when the scheduled trigger fired, my lock would activate, roll back the override, and route a ping to my silent log. That log had lit up at 4:12 p.m. Friday. Miles hadn't said a word, probably assumed his streamlining worked perfectly. Never occurred to him that his changes were theatrical, the kind of edit you print out to impress a stakeholder, but that does absolutely nothing under the hood. That was fine. Theater was his specialty, but now a partner had noticed. I crafted a reply to Norcrest, polite, professional, tight. We appreciate the flag. Our systems executed as designed, though a temporary reroute may have triggered sequence drift. No data loss or delay recorded. Reviewing underlying automation for consistency. No apology, no confession, just reassurance. And then I flagged the incident internally, labeled it exactly as it was. Unauthorized reconfiguration attempt contained via locked trigger. I CC'd no one, no drama, just one more breadcrumb for the system. Because this wasn't about catching him in the act. It was about documenting the moments where ego overtook understanding, where edits were made not because they were needed, but because someone thought they should leave a mark. You don't leave marks on operational logic. You leave stability, and that's what I'd built. A system too quiet to impress him. Too boring for his slide decks, but too strong for his shortcuts. The incident log was now 5 pages long, all small things, all subtle. But the patterns were growing. Unauthorized changes, one-sided incentives, shifted language in reporting. It painted a picture, not of incompetence, but of performance-first thinking at the cost of structural integrity, the kind of thinking that gets companies sued. I sat back and watched as the system hummed, untouched, stable, unbroken. He was editing shadows. I was maintaining the architecture, and now someone outside the building had noticed too. He strolled up to my desk like a guy who'd just hit a hole-in-one at a corporate retreat. Leaned on the cubicle divider like we were friends, that grin pasted on like a bumper sticker. Shiny, meaningless, starting to peel at the edges. "So," he said, tapping his fingers against the particle board. "The CEO's been asking a lot of questions this week." He paused, waiting for a reaction. I gave him none. "Everything good on your end?" he asked, tone light but loaded, like he expected me to break into nervous laughter or whisper some reassurance that his kingdom was still intact. I clicked my screen off, turned slowly toward him, and gave him the calmest smile I've delivered in months. "Absolutely," I said. I actually handed him that $60 you gave me. His hand stopped drumming. Smile didn't drop. It locked in place like it was afraid to move. "You what?" he asked, voice low and tight. "I gave it to him," I repeated, as if I were talking about a copy of the Wall Street Journal, not the catalyst for his unraveling. "Seemed like the right person to evaluate your incentives." He blinked. Once. Twice. Then he looked down at his phone, because of course it buzzed at that exact moment. His entire face shifted, like watching a mask melt off in slow motion. Caller ID, CEO, direct. He didn't pick up right away, just stared at it like the screen had betrayed him. I went back to my keyboard, not because I had something urgent to do, but because I wanted him to feel how quickly he'd been removed from the center of the room. and I let the silence stretch. A long, deliberate pause, just enough for him to realize that I wasn't bluffing, that the CEO wasn't calling about Q4 burn rates or partner onboarding velocity. He was calling about the envelope, the undocumented cash, the incentives without structure, the downstream edits that never actually stuck because I had locked the doors before Miles even found the keyhole. I could feel the panic rising off him like static, not explosive, just itchy, crawling, unraveling. He started, but didn't finish. Because he knew. He knew I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to tattle. I didn't need to post a Slack thread or fire off a performative email. I had given the CEO the one thing Miles never could. Unfiltered clarity, not through opinion, through proof, through patterns, through precision. I'm sure you'll figure it out, I said, not looking up. His phone kept buzzing. He didn't say another word, just stepped back and walked toward his office, moving slower than I'd ever seen him. By the time he disappeared around the corner, I already had the compliance log open again. Not because I needed to add anything, but because I wanted to read it one more time. Line 82. Non-structured incentive exchange escalated to executive office. Line 83. System integrity unchanged. Trigger locks engaged. External partner confirmed stability. I'd never needed power. I just needed the system to work. And now, it was doing exactly what it was built for. Monday morning rolled in gray and uneventful, the way only big days pretend to be. I logged into the weekly leadership sync out of habit, not expectation. Just the usual screen of faces, department heads trying to act alert at 9 a.m. with caffeine in one hand and corporate fatigue in the other. The placeholder agenda still had Ops Review Miles listed, but when the meeting began, it was HR who opened the call. No preamble, no substitution explanation. Just, we'll be conducting today's sync with a slight format shift. Please hold questions until the end. Everyone glanced around. You could feel the void he left in the room, not because his presence had ever brought clarity, but because it had always filled the silence with noise. Now the noise was gone and the silence meant something. They ran the updates like nothing had changed. Numbers, pipelines, risk review schedules. But I noticed what didn't get covered. No mention of Miles's project slate, no updates on his optimization initiative, no roadmap commentary, and no one asked. Because by then, everyone had seen the signs. The late Friday door closings, the urgent exec-level calendar holds, the missed replies on threads he usually hijacked within 3 minutes. His Slack bubble had been gray since Sunday. People stopped pretending they didn't notice. I said nothing in the sync. Just took notes, nodded where necessary, and dropped one quiet comment when asked about the Norcrest incident. The root cause was a non-authorized configuration edit. Systems functioned as designed. That was all I said, and everyone heard what I didn't. By Wednesday, the company-wide email landed. Subject line, Leadership Adjustments, Operations Team. No salutation, no explanation, just a block of text that read, as a part of Wexley Digital's ongoing commitment to operational excellence, we've made several adjustments to our leadership structure. Effective immediately, the operations team will be supported through a transitional trust framework, overseen in collaboration with senior compliance advisors and executive council. No name, no farewell, not even a euphemism like pursuing new opportunities. Miles had been erased with the same precision he never understood. The same day, a meeting invite appeared in my calendar from Ali. No subject line again. Just, CEO, Trust Systems Consult. The only other attendee listed was me. We spoke for 28 minutes. He asked questions no one ever had before. Not about systems, but about people. About what made a team trust its processes or abandon them. I walked him through the integrity locks. The quiet fail-safes, the patterns that expose performative management when you knew where to look. He never raised his voice, never acted shocked. He just listened. When we wrapped, he said simply, I'd like you to stay involved as we rebuild this, quietly, direct to this office. No promotion, no press release, no email blast with my name bolded, just access, trust, authority without spectacle. That afternoon, I opened my usual dashboard and saw something new. A new field at the bottom of the audit prep tracker labeled Trust Custodian Contact. It was blank, so I filled it in. Not for credit, not for clout, but because someone had to own it, and I already had. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was holding the floor together by myself. I felt the floor had been repoured, quietly, correctly. The launch happened at 2:37 a.m. on a Wednesday. No countdown, no banner message, no email blast with exclamation marks. Just a soft version update that pushed through the system silently, the way strong foundations always do. Audit Response Module Integrity Layer v1.0 footer tag authorized by D. Halberg. No bold font, no tooltip with accolades, just a name. Mine. Tucked into the code like a signature under a painting no one was meant to stare at, only to trust. The module itself wasn't flashy, just clean workflows, improved context logic, real-time escalation mapping, and tiered access triggers that finally reflected what we'd always needed: clarity before crisis. It's the kind of framework that doesn't win awards. It just prevents failure. And I built it. 3 months had passed since Miles disappeared from the system, quietly offboarded, permissions stripped, Slack handle deleted. Not a whisper since. His legacy, such as it was, had evaporated in a few calendar rotations, like a dry erase brainstorm wiped down by legal. The audit flags he'd triggered during his little optimization spree had all been resolved, most by features in this very update. That irony wasn't lost on me. People still asked, now and then, what happened. Where'd Miles go? Was he promoted? Transferred? I'd just shrug and say, not sure. Because it wasn't about him anymore. It never really was. It was about the system. And who protects it when no one's watching? That's the part most people never understand. The invisible work. The 2 a.m. failsafe checks, the rollback contingencies, the months of maintaining structures just well enough not to be noticed. It's thankless. Until it isn't. Until someone hands you an envelope stuffed with $60 and the kind of casual disrespect that reveals everything. It's still in my drawer, that envelope. Creased now, the ink on the card fading like even the paper's embarrassed. I keep it not out of bitterness, but as documentation. A symbol, a reminder that disrespect doesn't need to be shouted to be dangerous. Sometimes it comes folded, with a smirk and a wink, thinking you'll accept it because that's what quiet people do. And sometimes that envelope ends up being the key that opens a whole new layer of scrutiny, accountability, and authority. Real authority doesn't announce itself. It integrates, it stabilizes, it writes the protocols that outlast the ones who doubted them. I don't go around flashing the footer tag. Most people will never scroll that far down. But the people who know, they'll see it, and they'll know the difference between showmanship and stewardship. Sometimes all it takes is $60 to expose what's really broken, and who was quietly holding it together all along.
아니,
원희 물결표님이 낚시 일도 모를 때 따라가.
얼마나
어서 오세요.
얼마나 잘생겨야 초절정
원희
꽃미남이에요.
물결표님이 등반고디는 시장고디.
그러니까 크잖아. 별세 미남이야?
응.
나 소개시켜줘.
아유,
원희 물결표님이 난 절제미남.
언니는 와이프 있어서 패스. 오빠 건 진짜 대표 써야겠네. 돈가스랑 엄청 차갑겠다.
이시려.
그거 씹어.
이시려,
원희
이시려.
물결표님이 제주에만 절도미남.
왜 도둑놈을 만들어라.
삼촌 그냥 미남. 자 빨리 입에서 놀아.
원희 물결표님이 누나의 맘을 훔쳤잖아.
완전 훔쳤지. 아 그냥 도둑놈이 되는 거야?
원희 물결표님이 그러니 절도미남.
언어 구사력이 뛰어나.
아니,
이거 먹으니까 더 배고파.
내가 원희를 고매에 올려놓으려고 그랬는데
원희 물결표님이 이렇게라도 해야 치매 덜 걸린대 키우.
아, 그래?
이 방장을 하도 까가서 고매가 안 돼.
나 처음에 고메라 그러길래